Hello and welcome to the August edition of On the Horizon, which is our monthly podcast dedicated to helping you navigate through the tricking world of golf course turf maintenance by helping you to look and think a little further forward. I'm Henry Beshley from ICL.
And I'm Glenn Kirby from Syngenta. And it's August, Henry, and we have a lot to talk about. So let's crack on.
Oh, blimey, Glenn, you're in a hurry.
Yes, I am, Henry. We've got a very exciting series of interviews today with Meg from the STRI, Iestyn from Corhampton, and Clive Wood from the Hants and Isle of Wight Butterfly Conservation Group.
Oh, wow, that sounds great. But haven't we got time for your always illuminating poetry slot?
I'm saving that for the end, Henry.
Wow, what a shame, Glenn. But they do say that a change is as good as a rest.
Well, from the listening figures, it turns out that my poetry was so expressive and informative that people no longer found a need to listen to the rest of the podcast, as they'd already learned so much from my poetic summary of the month ahead.
Yes, that's right, Glenn. They were obviously switching off in their droves at that point because it was simply too good.
Yes, it was, Henry. So I'm going to sum up in a poetic style at the end.
Yeah, good idea, Glenn. And as always, I'm really looking forward to it. So there's no need to switch off just yet, everyone.
No, hang on in there.
So, Glenn, where are you taking us this month for our climatic data that gives us a flavour of the conditions that we might need to prepare for during August?
Well, Henry, since August is the month of school holidays, I thought we should visit some holiday camp destinations.
Excellent, Glenn. And something of a sitter, I would say, this month.
Yes, so we're visiting Skegness in England.
I've been to that one, actually.
Yeah, that particular brand of holiday camp is still going strong. Yeah. We're going to Ayr in Scotland, and there was a holiday camp there that closed down in 1987. Mosney, near County Meath in Ireland. That one closed down in the early 1980s. And in Wales, we're going to Fweli, which closed in 1998.
Okay, so we're a little northern heavy this month, I think, with Skegness on the east coast of England being the furthest south. But let's see how we go. And so, as always, let's start with the net moisture balance, or the amount of rainfall minus the net evapotranspiration losses. And that gives us a pointer of the direction that our soil moisture levels might be heading during August.
Yes, and remember that we are using recent data from the last 13 years. So, for Skegness, for them, a wet year is 36 millimetres drier at the end of August than at the start. That's a wet year. An average year for them is 76 millimetres drier at the end of August than at the start. And a dry year in Skegness, by the end of August, they are 107 millimetres drier than when they started.
So August is a drying month for them then?
Yes, it is. If we go to Fweli in Wales, a wet year for them is 61 millimetres wetter at the end of August than when they begun.
Oh.
An average year for them is just 14 millimetres, 1/4, drier than when they started. And a dry year, they can be up to 87 millimetres drier at the end of August than when they started it.
Okay, so not much of a pointer then for Fweli in Wales, as usual. It looks like they could get anything in August.
Indeed. So Ayr on the west coast of Scotland, a wet year for them. They'll be 30 millimetres wetter at the end of the month than when they started. An average year for them is pretty much break even, just 2 millimetres drier at the end than at the start. And a dry year for them, the driest years they've seen in the last 12 years, is 37 millimetres drier at the end of August than at the beginning of it.
Okay, so they're very much in the balance there then, and it feels like August could be drab for them.
Mosney in Ireland, a wet year is 35 millimetres wetter at the end of the August than the start. An average year is 34 millimetres drier, and a dry year is 76 millimetres drier at the end of August than when it started.
Okay, so generally dry there for Mosney. And so it looks like, in terms of net moisture balance, that we've got a mixed bag going on, don't we, for our locations this month. It looks like August will probably be dry on the east coast of both England and Ireland, but it might be wet or dry or drab in the northwests, in sort of Wales and over there in Ayr. And of course, the impact of those conditions will very much depend on the soil moisture reserves that they had there going into the month. But it is certainly clear for all the locations that we will need to keep a close eye on that weather forecast to know just how defensive that we might need to be with regard to our irrigation strategy. All right, so what about the temperatures then?
Okay, well, we'll start with the extremes first, Henry. Skegness, highest temperature reached in August in recent years, 31.5.
Ooh.
And the coldest they've seen was 6.6 degrees.
Okay, so potentially hot there on top of, the high likelihood that they're going to be dry.
That's right. That's why it's such a great holiday destination.
Great holiday destination.
Ayr, they have a high temperature in recent years of 25 degrees and a low of 3.8.
Quite nice. Borderline hot there, but occasionally surprisingly low at night.
That's right. Pwllheli, they have hit 29.4 degrees, so not quite reaching that 30, but very close.
Yeah.
With a low overnight temperature in recent history of 6.5.
They've been very hot there. That's pretty hot, isn't it? 29.4.
And staying warm overnight, yeah. And then Mosney over in Ireland, high temperature of 25.5 with a low of 3.
Ooh, a low of 3. Okay, so, they're very much the extremes, though, aren't they? What about the recent averages?
Okay, so if we go up to Skegness, up to Skeggy, daytime average of 21.6,
yes,
with a nighttime average of 12.3.
That really is quite nice, isn't it? Rather than bracing. And mild overnight, which is interesting and could be agronomically significant.
It could.
Maybe.
Ayr, they are hitting a daytime average of 18.7 with a nighttime average of 10.4.
Yeah, very nice. And still mild overnight.
All right. Pwllheli, daytime average 17.6 with a nighttime average of 12.2.
Yeah, same again, I would say.
Indeed, very warm overnight. Mosney, daytime average 18.7 and a nighttime average of 10.4.
Okay, it's the same again. So the difference between them all really seems to be their likelihood of extremes developing.
Yeah, and we do need to keep an eye on those weather horizons for those extremes coming at us.
Yeah, we do.
Now, one of the interesting things that does start to happen in August when you look at the data is that the leaf wetness hours really start to ramp up.
Yes, and that is a significant development, isn't it? The August mornings, from my memory, can start to become sort of damper underfoot or dewy, which of course would increase the risk of fungal disease activity, for instance.
Yes, and it's noticeable because February, March, April, May and June all had fairly low leaf wetness hours. But now, as we start to move into August, that starts to shift upwards. Now, it's not a huge jump, but we move into more humidity. We start to retain the temperature, and the UK and Ireland becomes a bit of a breeding ground for those pathogens. And if I start looking around on Twitter this year, particularly during July, it appears we started entering some of those more kind of humid conditions earlier at times this year. We had that high leaf wetness and we had high overnight temperatures already. So some of you will have already had a taster of what is going to become more likely in August.
Yes, we've noticed that on the bowling green actually in the last week, and it has also been flagged up by the new app that you've been developing too. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah, more on that in the next couple of months, Henry. Now, of course, at this time of year, we have the growth to counter things, don't we? So if we get challenges, we can normally grow them out. Things like white-ear patch, brown patch, microdokium patch. They're there, but usually not a big concern. But we now start to have to be very aware. As it is the back end of August, it is the start of that, the beginning of that first microdokium battle, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I know, and it's depressing as well. But we should probably reintroduce those battle phases that we talked about last autumn and winter a little bit later on to reacquaint ourselves with the idea that we need to employ different strategies as we progress through the autumn and winter.
Yes, and let's not go too deep into the leaf wetness hours just yet, as they are only just starting to nudge upwards, but they are on the move. It's not a big jump from July, but it is a firm move in the wrong direction. But if we look at the 4 locations we've got on our list today, we are currently at, or August should be, around 5 hours a day on average of leaf wetness in Skegness, 6 hours a day of leaf wetness in Ayr and Mosney, and 9.5 hours a day in Fwelly.
Which is quite high, isn't it? And Wales, yet again, reveals itself to be the most challenging agronomic area in the UK and Ireland. But it is, on average, still quite low for the others, isn't it, the leaf wetness? But entering the game. OK, so what about daylight hours in August? June the 21st was the longest day. And to me, that feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And for me on the south coast, I had 16.5 hours of daylight on the 21st of June. But by the 31st of August, that is down to 13.5 hours of daylight. We've already lost 3 hours of daylight by the end of August.
Yes, and that really is quite depressing, isn't it? And I've also noticed the sort of that change in the early mornings too. It's not quite so light when I get up.
Yeah, so we really now do begin to move into longer nights and shorter days. And that has an impact on that leaf moisture, that leaf wetness. The nights start to get cooler at the end of the month, and cooler air can hold less moisture. So overnight condensation begins to increase, and that means higher leaf wetness. Yes. And at this time, when we see high humidity, the turf transpiration levels drop, and this is coupled with high soil moisture levels, guttation increases as the turf forces moisture out from the leaf tips. So we have this double whammy going on of increased guttation moisture on the plant and increased condensation from the air. But we're still seeing high temperatures, so those dews do burn off during the day.
Yes.
But we begin to see this trend of more moisture sitting on the leaf for longer in August. And that combination of leaf wetness and high temperatures is really interesting agronomically. We are still at our warmest. The month of August is generally our second warmest month of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's still summer, isn't it? But it does feel like that we're already trending towards that agronomic autumn.
Yes, but remember, August is the height of the summer from a temperature point of view. So we are still in 10 to 14 day intervals for our primo apps.
Yes. Okay. So the temperatures aren't too different to July, but in reality it is starting to feel a little bit different because the year is moving on. In August we still have warm days, but the day lengths are decreasing and the leaf wetness is increasing. But the stresses might well be in the game in full force as well, and combining, on top of that already intensive maintenance pressure. That's going to still be going at full tilt, isn't it? And so the turf during August is going to be under pressure one way or another.
Yes, August is an interesting month, isn't it? I think I think it's the closest we get to those kind of Northern American summers that I experienced, which go hot and humid in May, and that drags on right into September with really high disease pressure just all over the place, leading them down the path of close interval fungicide programs to keep them clean. It's not something we need to do in the UK, fortunately, due to the different agronomic conditions, but August is about as close as we get to those Northern American climates. And with the climate moving like it is, Henry, who knows where we're going to be by the end of our careers?
Goodness knows, Glenn. But, it's clear from what we've said that we will really need to keep our wits about us during August. Okay, Glenn. Holiday season is on the horizon, but what are the golfers expecting from the courses during August?
Well, of course, August is still summer. Many club competitions still going on, so expectations will remain high. It's a time for some golf courses and course managers to be renovating their greens, and this can ruffle a few feathers. But it's soon grown out because, as we've mentioned, it's a period of almost guaranteed warmth and growth. And sometimes, for some places, a quieter time for the golf club due to the holiday period.
Yeah, but it could also be that the course is rammed with members as well as juniors and students that are home for the summer, all taking advantage of those summer conditions and destroying the driving range and wearing out the practice putting green. And so even though all the majors will be sort of done for the year, it's still the height of the season, isn't it? And we've got the Ryder Cup and the Solheim Cup approaching over that golfing horizon to keep us all stoked up. How was August for you, Glenn, as a course manager?
Well, it was a month of managing with fewer staff generally due to the team's holidays being taken. We saw less golfers on the golf course. A lot of our members were taking holidays abroad with family. And corporate and society golf seemed to slow right down too through that period. And for us, it generally seemed a good opportunity to get into some serious renovations.
Yes, the greens renovations are quite commonplace in August, aren't they? I know that I used to push for them when I was doing my agronomy. And as long as the calendar can be adjusted to make a decent window, we can schedule some quite extensive programs of work at this time to take advantage of the growth. And this might be work that could not be carried out later on in the autumn due to poor recovery or an increased risk of disease incidents later on. And, those renovations in August can really help us make some significant agronomic headway. We can target things like organic matter reduction, really important things. And so we might be scheduling aggressive treatments like deep scarification or double coring and heavy top dressing and things like that. It can make a huge difference to get the heavy work out of the way while growth is still strong and before the disease season really starts in earnest.
Yeah, renovations in August do have their challenges, but it also gives us the best opportunity in the year, the best opportunity to make a serious dent in all those agronomic wins that we keep talking about, those things that will help move greens forward at the same time as achieving a quick recovery.
Yes, but it is tricky quite often for golfers to grasp the need to renovate at this time, especially when the greens are still at their best. But, there's never a good time to do it, is there?
No, there's not. Good data and excellent communication is the key to this one, Henry.
Yeah, it certainly is, Glenn, especially if we want to improve things.
Okay, Henry, so what are the agronomic risks that we may face in August?
Well, Glenn, the weather data does reveal a bit of a mixed bag, doesn't it? But we're generally, to some degree at least, spending our time in August guarding against the potential for stressful conditions developing, and that could be in the form of excessive heat or prolonged drought or high light intensities, and of course the ongoing intensive management stresses that are still really high at this time.
Yes, those stresses might all be in the game in August, and the danger is that they start to combine to really ramp up that pressure.
Yes.
Ramp it up to a point where the turf begins to deteriorate, either directly or indirectly as a result of secondary diseases.
Very significant agronomically. And so we need to discuss each of these stresses individually, but it's also important to think about them in combination, because we might get caught off guard if they're all combining. And as we've already mentioned, we've got to face the fact that although it might appear routine, the management intensity, even if we've tried to ease it back a little bit, is still going to be very high at this time. And so it won't take much for the other stresses to combine with that and cause some problems. And this, of course, is the reason why we bang on about the development of anthracnose so much at this time, because it can really sneak up on you as a result of pressures building up on the back of your routine management intensity.
Yes, and in August, we might also be scheduling some renovation work on top of that.
Yeah.
Which can bring additional complications to encourage that disease activity.
Yeah, absolutely. And the leaf wetness being on the increase will only amplify that risk.
Indeed. I remember August being a time where it felt like summer was beginning to drag on a bit. It sometimes felt like we've been in the heat of that battle, creating surfaces, fighting drought and heat for the last 8 or 9 weeks. And now, a time when we needed more than ever to keep our wits about us, because there could be a lot going on. It's very easy to take your eye off the ball at this late stage of the summer. Okay, so what about those stresses then, Henry?
So in August, as we've already said, we are very concerned about the impact of a number of potentially damaging stresses, namely heat, temperatures consistently above 25 degrees C, drought, and that invisible one, the prolonged exposure to high intensities of UV light. And these strategies can be damaging in isolation, but they can also become really damaging when they combine with each other.
Or act in conjunction with intensive management pressure.
Yes. So let's start with heat stress. As you highlighted earlier, August often experiences high temperatures in the UK and Ireland, which can lead to heat stress on the turf grass. The threshold for the development of heat stress symptoms can vary depending on the type of turf grass. In the UK and Ireland, we're talking about cool season grasses, and for those, heat stress can typically start to develop when temperatures consistently rise above 25 degrees C. The impact of heat stress is quite profound in that it can reduce photosynthesis, it can create an increased water demand, and on its own it can result in turf thinning and decline, and when in conjunction with the other stresses, this type of decline can be both hastened and exaggerated.
Okay, so does it impact differently on different grass species?
Yeah, of course. Annual meadowgrass is well known to be highly susceptible to heat stress. By its nature, it's not built for stress.
No, it's a disturbance-loving plant, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Glenn. It is designed to quickly invade and reproduce in disturbed environments, and so does not have many attributes that help it survive stress. It's not what it's all about, really, apart from seeding, I suppose. And so it can quickly show signs of heat stress, such as wilting, yellowing, and even dieback in extreme circumstances.
Yep, and we've all seen examples of that.
Yes, bent grasses, on the other hand, are more robust and can tolerate a range of environmental conditions, including heat, but they are not stress tolerators as such, and so they still suffer from heat stress and will decline during extended periods of those high temperatures.
Interesting.
Yeah, fine fescues are typically more heat tolerant than the annual meadowgrass and the bent grasses. However, they can still be susceptible to heat stress, especially when coupled with the other stresses.
Yeah, it's of course very difficult to isolate these summer stresses from each other, isn't it?
Yeah, they occur together, don't they? But when under intense and prolonged heat, drought pressure and high UV light intensity, even the fine fescues will experience browning, thinning, disease and stress-related decline.
Yes, and we did see that in the southeast a couple of years back, didn't we? In that really intense heat and drought, even the fescues there gave up.
Yeah, they did. But grass type selection is undoubtedly important and will provide a greater level of protection in those areas that are constantly, under the magnifying glass.
Okay, so what else can we do?
Well, our heat stress mitigation strategies might include, obviously, adequate and efficient irrigation involving soil moisture monitoring right from the start, targeted hand watering, deep watering, all assisted with the use of surfactants.
Yes, in the States we used to go out and syringe the greens during the day, but I'm not so sure that's such a common practice now. The use of soil moisture probes, which has come in since I was working over there, that seems to have placed a much higher value on correct moisture levels rather than short-term cooling of the turf. In some extreme cases, we had fans that were also used to cool down the turf, which, were pretty simply increasing the airflow across that surface, helping the plant to fend for itself. That's not as big an issue in the UK and Ireland as it is over there, but there can be some weeks where we can really do some damage when we get that extreme heat, and we need to think about the other stresses that we might be imparting at that stage and what can we do to back off those stresses that we are in control of.
Absolutely. Yeah, stress management is all about easing the balance of all the pressures, which is our integrated anthracnose disease management strategy, isn't it, in a nutshell? And we've been talking about that all year, haven't we? Taking out those sort of unnecessary stresses or easing the balance where we can, easing back on mowing, making sure that we've got sufficient nutrient, our irrigation strategy is well placed. We're using those surfactants to optimize water use, and we've got things like Primo in the game to help with the sort of general stress tolerance of the sward, because, we're always, trying to maintain plant health and improve the ability of the turf to tolerate those combining pressures and so reduce the risk of anthracnose developing.
Yes, August could be a high risk time for anthracnose, couldn't it? And our management of those stresses is central to the impact of that and our ITM strategy. Yes,
and so thinking about the other stresses, we have that unseen one at play also, don't we, Glenn?
Maybe unrecognised would be a better way of saying it.
Yes, but with the introduction of the turf pigment rider a few years back, you looked into the issue of UV light stress, didn't you? And I think it opened up all of our eyes a bit, didn't it? Because it wasn't something that was particularly on any of our radar. But I think we all soon realised that it might actually be quite a significant factor that contributes significant levels of stress onto the sward at times during the summer and could really contribute to that turf decline. I don't think we kind of realised that it was even in the game.
Yeah, the increased sunlight exposure and higher UV radiation levels in August can significantly impact turf grass health. The effects of UV light stress include a kind of sunburn and bleaching of the turf grass, resulting in a yellowing or browning of that foliage, reduced photosynthesis and hindering of the turf's ability to produce energy. That UV light does weaken the turf's natural defense mechanisms, making it more susceptible to diseases and other stresses. But it is tricky to separate out from drought stress and heat stress, which will likely coincide at exactly the same time.
Yeah, of course. And so we use Rider at this time as a kind of sunscreen to protect the turf against the direct and damaging impact of intense UV light at this time. Rider is an agronomic tool, I think, not a paint.
Yes, and irrigation as well, relaxed mowing, nutrition, and the use of plant growth regulators can all ease the overall pressure. Okay, now what about drought stress?
Well, all the stresses are slightly different, aren't they? And the development of drought stress tends to be more of a slow burner than the intensive hits of heat and light. But, if we look back, June was really dry for many, and although July has been a bit mixed, up to press, it doesn't feel like it's been wet enough, especially further south, to replenish the soils and allow us to be more at ease going into August. So the risk of drought stress is still there.
It is, yes. Those ET rates are still pumping away at this time, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which makes even mixed conditions, in reality, drying conditions. Only in the wettest weeks do we actually get wetter at this time of year. Even light showers, it's likely that the daily evapotranspiration rates will outweigh them significantly.
Yes, we really shouldn't get fooled by a few days of light rain here and there, or a drop in temperatures as we've been experiencing in Yorkshire during July. As your demo app has really helped me to understand. And so we do need to be mindful that August could be a time when drought stress could slowly build, and sometimes that sort of building stress could be on the quiet.
Yeah, reduced rainfall exceeded by evapotranspiration, driven by high temperatures, generally but not always, leaves us in a moisture deficit situation in August. And that requires us to manage or mitigate the situation with strategies outlined earlier.
Yes.
But where effective irrigation is not available, Henry, then your preventative management strategies have got to adapt. We've got to include the high quality turf surfactants, because that becomes super important. Yes,
we need to think ahead, don't we? Because the consequences of droughting are severe, and the direct symptoms can range from simple things like reduced growth and vigour to more damaging outcomes like wilting, for instance, and dieback. And of course, let's not forget, with all of these, the increased susceptibility to diseases, which can be extremely damaging. And of course, as we've been saying all along, these outcomes are amplified and accelerated when combined with the other stresses.
Yes, indeed. And you're going to focus on one of those diseases a little later on, aren't you?
Yes, I am, because red thread can really jump in on the back of droughting, can't it? As my back lawn is currently a sorry testament to. So I thought we'd speak about that a little later on. So, to avoid or mitigate the problems caused by drought stress, we work preventatively all year to optimise soil moisture retention and utilisation by the turf. And of course, soil moisture monitoring is the foundation of our drought management strategy to allow us to see and understand what is happening in the soil, to see if a sort of drought situation is building down there. At the bowling green, we actually routinely take soil moisture readings down to 3 depths each day: 4 centimetres, 8 centimetres and 12 centimetres, because it really helps us get a handle on things. But I accept that this is only feasible for small areas.
You really are an obsessive, aren't you, Henry?
Yes. But we do have a quirky soil profile, Glenn. And of course, soil moisture management is the key for us in a lot of different agronomic areas. And so, yes, we are obsessive because it is so influential on the general condition and performance of the green. And we wanted to try and take control of it as much as we can. But also, in terms of stress mitigation strategies, we would, of course, as we do on the bowling green, use surfactants to aid water retention and slow down the drying process and help facilitate, efficient re-wetting as and when it's required. And we might also do other things like raise the cutting height to reduce the impact of turf stress during drought conditions. And also, of course, we need to maintain plant health with appropriate nutrition and employ those other stress management strategies, of which the programmed use of Primo Max is the absolute king.
I agree, Henry. But it's not all about stress at this time of year, is it?
No, we have been going on about it, but it's not all about stress, is it? It's worse than that, because agronomically we have the significant development that during August, as you previously highlighted, we have that increased level of leaf wetness entering the game.
And that, of course, increases the risk of disease activity.
Yeah, especially if turf stress is in the game. Extended periods of leaf wetness can be an ideal environment for the fungal diseases to develop. Common diseases that can affect golf turf in damp conditions at this time include microdochium patch, dollar spot, brown patch, and red thread, all of which can be extremely damaging, as we know.
Yes, and you do start to notice those heavy dews returning in August, and they can get in the way of a clean cut a bit. And it can also cause more clippings to be left around the course as well.
Yes. Yeah, there's wider implications, isn't there, to that leaf wetness. But, as we said, that move towards increasing sort of leaf wetness can be a bit of an agronomic turning point in August. It's not necessarily the end of summer, but it is the first signs that things are starting to slowly change and move towards autumn. And of course, autumn is disease time in the UK and Ireland. And because there's real fuel in the game, isn't there, for fungal development? Warm and humid conditions, extended periods of leaf wetness, turf stress going on. Yeah, it's a difficult time. And so in August, we need to make a start on our microdochium patch integrated management strategy and start to line up our defences, because we've got some battles to fight in the months ahead, and they require specific strategies that are agile enough to be able to react and change with the conditions.
Yes, we are now beginning to think about our 3 battles against the dreaded microdochium patch disease.
Yeah, we are. And we're going to be talking about them, I would think, for the next 6 months at least. But we need to start thinking about them now.
Indeed. Okay, so battle 1, that starts in late summer.
Yes.
And early autumn, when generally things are going okay in terms of turf health and growth, but there are periods when the disease pressure starts to ramp up.
Yeah, we might encounter cooler temperatures, heavy dews, wet or cloudy weather.
Yes, or renovations that involve heavy top dressings.
And that top dressing in itself can really put the pressure up a notch or two. And there might also be some fertiliser in the game, because we're trying to generate recovery. So there's a lot of things going on, isn't there, that might sort of ramp up that risk. And we certainly need to tread carefully, especially if those weather conditions go against us during August.
Yes, and if that dressing is lying on the surface, it will put a stop to significant growth.
Yeah.
Potentially smother the sward, maybe reduce cutting until the sand has disappeared, and all of that can increase the risk of disease activity.
Yeah, so in terms of boosting recovery from renovations, we find that mineral sources of nitrogen help the turf to fare better against disease around about this time, and we do try to be a little careful using organic sources of nitrogen for this kind of work, especially where the increased risk of disease pressure might be an issue.
Okay, so battle 1 is all about being mindful of the disease pressure that might be building due to the external or management factors. And then we have to put measures in place to try and reduce the risk when it's coming.
Yeah.
Things like moisture management, plant health, those kind of things. And maybe, just maybe, bring in the use of a fungicide to prevent disease if it's felt that the risk or pressure is too high.
Yes. it's an important point. During Battle 1, we're not in a fungicide program schedule just yet, but we're also not in denial that disease pressure can be really high, especially if we've got renovations and sand top dressings going on. And so we do need to be ready if a fungicide application is needed.
Yeah, it is too early to be getting scarring, Henry.
Yeah, it is. And I suppose, we shouldn't just be thinking about all 18 greens. The need for fungicide application might only apply to localized areas that are more susceptible to attack at this time, as a result of being shaded or sheltered environments that lie damp.
Yeah, it could be that you're just treating one or two greens preventatively due to their individual situation of heightened risk. So what do we think about with those renovations then?
The need for a preventative fungicide application before our renovations to protect the turf during that time, I think, will be dependent on a few factors, won't it? The general health of the turf will be influential. The underlying soil organic matter levels, for instance, will also be important. The intensity of the renovations or the amount of top dressing that you're applying will influence that decision, as well as the forecasted weather conditions, not only around the time of the renovation, but during the period of recovery. And so for really heavy top dressing applications, for instance, or after things like quite aggressive treatments like deep scarification, full recovery can be a couple of weeks, can't it?
Yeah, the forecast will play a role here, won't it? And that will help us decide if we need that preventative fungicide to get us through safely.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, I would think that heavy top dressing would be ramping up the ambient disease pressure a couple of notches. And so if conditions were a little bit borderline without any dressing going on, then you will definitely be in preventative fungicide territory, with it in the game. So what fungicides might we be using for a preventative application before our renovations at this time, Glenn?
Well, my go-to for this time of year now is the FR321 tank mix containing Medallion, Heritage and Rider. It's superb preventative treatment to protect you during that renovation period. So if you're going to put it on, aim to get it in a couple of days before you start that renovation.
Yeah, it is really good. It's really found its feet, that tank mix, hasn't it? Okay, so before we leave this section, which has gone on a bit, isn't it? But there's plenty going on. Let's just remind ourselves, or start to get our heads around Battle 2 of our Microdochium patch integrated management strategy, which tends to start in September and October, depending where you're located.
Yes, that occurs later in the autumn when disease pressure is consistently higher for longer, and that's when the temperatures begin to drop too, so that turf growth begins to slow, and therefore the recovery is slower, allowing the damage to really take hold.
Yeah, and that's the time when we sort of need to shift the way in which we think about things, doesn't it? At that time we're very much into our slow it down cultural practice, the things that create conditions that are less conducive for the development of Microdochium patch, appropriate nutrition, surface water management, and the occasional use of iron sulfate are things that we've discussed in the past.
Yeah, that's right. All that integrated with a more programmed scheduling of fungicides.
Yes.
Which I think we'll start to discuss next month in September.
Yeah, that's the difference, isn't it? We bring in a programmed approach with the fungicides when the disease pressure is more constant. All right, but thinking about August, what are our fungicides that we might have to bring into play for general use if we need them during this time, Glenn?
Well, in the UK, we have Heritage, which I would be thinking about for August, and over in Ireland, they have Serenity available to them, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And of course, that FR321 agronomy box that we've already spoken about. Heritage is a great choice at this time of year with it being so broad spectrum. But as always, preventative applications are best. Fungicide applications at this time of year, they're fairly short-lived, even though they're generally systemics that we use. Yeah. And so they really should be targeted at key disease pressure events, things like renovations and frank no trigger events. Protection during a big event maybe where you're kind of pushing those greens harder than you want to. Things like that is where I would target fungicides through August.
Yeah. Yeah, Battle 1 is all about that targeting of those trigger events, isn't it? All right, but let's not forget the current danger of dollar spot developing in August, especially in areas that experience high temperatures and high humidity levels coupled with leaf wetness and drought stress.
Yes, and if those risk levels are high, as flagged up by the Smith-Kearns model on previously affected sites, then we might begin to adjust our maintenance practices. We should maintain an appropriate mowing height, avoid overwatering, and irrigate early in the morning to reduce leaf wetness.
Yeah.
We might think about using iron sulfate or increase the frequency of our rolling. In the longer term, we want to keep an eye on those thatch levels, keep that in check through regular aeration and dethatching practices. And we should certainly be implementing a balanced fertilisation programme to provide adequate nutrition to the turf grass without promoting excessive growth.
Yeah, and so we really do need to be keeping an eye on that near horizon to be aware of any potential building sort of disease pressure and be ready to compensate with those additional measures, or even be at the ready to protect any vulnerable areas with fungicide if the risk is deemed high enough.
Yeah, let's not walk blindly into a potentially serious situation here. It would need to be particular conditions to ramp up that dollar spot risk, wouldn't it? And let that Smith-Kearns model with data from your site do the thinking for you.
Yeah, exactly. So as we sort of discussed previously, dollar spot is not a disease that you can easily get a feel for, the building risk. So you have to use those models. So look, there's plenty to think about, isn't there, in August, Glenn?
Yes, there is. The management intensity is at its height, and all the stresses could well be in play here, both biotic or diseases and abiotic, those environmental stresses.
Yeah.
And the balance or combination of all these pressures put together will determine how things drop for you on your site.
Yeah, and we need to be careful, especially if there's renovations in the game, to add that extra level of pressure or complexity.
August can be a heady time, Henry.
Yes, there is a lot to think about. And as we always say, Glenn, greenkeeping is never easy.
Never is, Henry. Never is.
So that's it for part 1.
Yeah, there's loads to think about in August, isn't there? It's an agronomic beast.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? And anyway, after all that, it was quite a long run through that one. I definitely need a cup of tea.
Yeah, me too, Henry.
I'll put the kettle on.
Good idea.
So, welcome back to part 2 of August's On the Horizon. And in part 2, we'll be talking about Chafer's and acelepryn application timing.
And the challenge that is red thread.
Yes, and you are going to look forward to the Golf Environment Awards, aren't you, Glenn?
I am indeed. We have a few interesting guests this month.
And we do. But first, a cuppa, I think.
Ooh, what are you drinking, Henry?
Well, I've got to say, it hasn't really been iced tea weather since we last spoke, Glenn.
No.
But I did go halfway there and have started drinking my tea without milk.
Ooh.
And I think it might be another one in the long line of instances when I realise that I've been wrong about something for the whole of my life. I'm really enjoying it, Glenn.
Oh, I'm intrigued, Henry. What are the other things?
Well, there's plenty, as my wife would attest to. Okay. But the big ones are, I suppose, bananas, opera, and, of course, owning a dog.
What would you do without Peggy Sue?
Well, that is unthinkable, Glenn, although I think it might be more accurate to say that she owns me. Anyway, what about you? What's in your cup at the moment?
Oh, well, Henry, I'm on a big shot this month. Ooh. It's a coffee bag. I like a tea bag.
Yeah.
But a coffee bag.
Whoa. Yeah, they've actually been a thing for quite a while now, around 300 years, I think. Yeah. And anyway, how is the coffee that is conveniently packaged in its own filter bag?
Well, it's got a fancy label, and the fancy label tells me it's a punchy, full-bodied coffee, brimming with dark chocolate, gooey fudge brownie, and warm vanilla.
God.
Apparently, it's brilliant black or magic with milk.
Magic with milk. So how are you taking it?
With milk.
Very good. And what flavours are you actually getting, Glenn?
Well, let's give it a go, shall we?
Yeah, go on. Ooh.
Well,
yes.
it's like coffee, really.
Yeah, exactly. I know exactly what you're saying there. Coffee was another one of those things that I have accepted that I've been wrong about all of my life. I had my final cup of coffee last year when I realised that I don't actually like it and that it all tastes the same. I think I did get a little sucked into the cult of the coffee hit, like everyone else, and so I used to dabble a bit, but I've managed to break free from that particular habit, and as you know, I am now sticking to the clear-minded high ground of tea at all times. Anyway, rant about coffee over. Anyway, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, I'm glad you've come back down from that one, Henry. Yes, I have been out to Denmark, which was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, Denmark is supposed to be really good.
Yeah, it was. I got to meet a load of customers and really got to start to grips with the Danish market, which is fascinating and something we should talk about one day, my growing understanding of how the different European countries operate and how that influences how they grow turf.
Yes, actually, we really do need to do that because that would be really interesting and something that we all might learn from in the UK and Ireland, because I know some of the European territories are already experiencing, the sort of regulatory constraints that we fear might affect us in the future. So there's plenty to discuss there, I would think. Any initial take-home messages?
Okay, so take-home messages from Denmark. They're big bent grass growers. Climate is quite good out there at killing POA, so bent always has a chance. They seem to be fairly opposed to anything that's been registered, which is interesting. They have a big desire to be organic.
Okay.
I saw a lot of take-all patch out there and a lot of dry patch. But most importantly, Danish greenkeepers love a deconstructed hot dog.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Glenn, but obviously a deconstructed hot dog sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it was. We did a 3-day roadshow, Henry, and I've never seen people get so excited about food before.
Whoa.
I know greenkeepers love a bacon bap, but, the Danish and the sausage queue, it was just ridiculous.
Wow.
When they got their sausage, Henry, and their hot dog...
Yes.
It's in a box in its component parts. Like, they eat the bread separately to the sausage. They're not in each other. They're in a box next to each other.
Right.
And I found it all quite difficult to deal with, if I'm honest. Of course, my sausage was well and truly inserted into my bread roll.
Yeah. It was just too much to compute, wasn't it?
It was horrible.
And old habits die hard, Glenn. There's no need to feel guilty about it. But I'm surprised you didn't give it a go. I mean, it's not too much of a stretch to eat a sausage and some bread separately, especially when there's sort of the promise of some culinary enlightenment in the offing. It might have been one of those things that you've been wrong about all along, Glenn.
I did try it, Henry, but I didn't like it. So I quickly reverted, despite this disappointed look on every Danish greenkeeper who passed me by whilst I was eating my sausage in a roll. I don't think I'm going to fit in Denmark, Henry.
No, I don't either. I mean, that is, what a letdown you were there.
Sorry.
But anyway, look, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Didn't you have a golfing break? You said you were going to... I think you said you were going to go out and play some golf. How did that go? Did you become Johnny DeChambeau?
Yeah, I had a little under-the-radar 3-round golf weekend with some non-greenkeeping buddies. And yes, I was very much JDC.
Great. So how did you get on?
Well, 3 rounds of golf, Henry, all had their own merits, but the best round of golf was definitely the worst conditioned golf course.
No.
Not going to say where it was that we went, that's just unfair. But this golf course had its own challenges, and they did amazingly considering the challenges they had. They were a triple SI, heavily restricted on what they could do, had some other challenges, including huge herds of animals wandering around freely. But Henry, the layout and the environment was just outstanding. And even though my golfing buddies had no understanding of golf course architecture or even really a big interest in environmental issues, they did not stop smiling.
Yes, you know, the golf course design and the surrounding environment has a huge part to play in the golfing experience, doesn't it? You know, Bob Taylor, all those years ago, used to call it the subliminal feeling of well-being. And I always used to get on his nerves by saying that I don't think it's subliminal. But are you saying that the course condition wasn't important?
No, I'm saying an outstanding layout and an interesting terrain and an amazing environment made golf fun and interesting. Now, I think the reason I mention it is because some people walk around these kind of sites and, you know, they walk around these sites that are blessed and they think this kind of golf is replicable.
Yeah.
But it's not. This landscape was absolutely outstanding and something that other places can only dream of. You know, it was a site that was so good that it makes you forget condition, and that is a rare thing indeed. But when you find it, you really know about it.
Yeah, you do.
Now, the other end of the spectrum was a very high-end track we played, which was immaculate. Outstanding surfaces, Henry, an absolute greenkeeping showpiece.
Right.
However, my 2 pals, they lost about 9 balls down the first 2 holes.
Yeah, so it's a tough track then. You know, you pays your money and takes your choice, Glenn.
Yeah, and some places are blessed with natural beauty and other places are more of a technical challenge. But in my opinion, environment and architecture wins, certainly for a first visit.
All right, so but what about if you ask your golfing pals?
What, Pete and Martin?
Yes, Pete and Martin.
Well, they'll say the first course was amazing.
The one with the strong architecture, the great natural golfing terrain.
Yep, and they'll say the last course was too tough. They'll have completely forgotten how good the surfaces were because they spent most of their time wandering around in the deep rough.
Yeah.
But the third course, Henry.
The third course, go on.
Well, that was the real winner. 18 holes of par 3 golf, nothing longer than 140 yards. The best 2 hours golfing of my life. So much fun.
Well, that is good, but you are, by your own admission, a bit of a rubbish golfer, Glenn.
Well, yeah, but you've never seen the Kirby swing, have you? You have no idea how talented I actually am.
No, that is true, Glenn. Yes. So, anyway, based on your weekend, what is most important to you?
Well, to me and my 2 buddies, who all played fairly closely, incidentally, to our handicaps of 21, 18 and 14, except for the tough track.
Okay.
So, yes, we were rubbish, but we're also pretty much centre ground in the whole golfing market. So, rather than calling us rubbish, I'm going to say 3 distinctly average golfers.
Well, that's fair enough, isn't it? Okay, so for 3 distinctly average golfers, what was better? The fun, the architecture and environment, or the superb playing qualities?
Well, if you could combine the lot, then the answer is obvious, isn't it? But those are the lucky few courses that people like me, Martin and Pete can't afford to play. I would say, unless the golf course is an enjoyable experience, then the quality of the surfaces gets forgotten pretty quickly. It kind of made me think about what we talk about a lot and how we really focus on playing surfaces. But actually, it doesn't matter how good those surfaces are, Henry. There is a bigger picture here, and that is making the game more enjoyable.
I completely agree, Glenn. And so is that why you wanted to talk about the Golf Environment Awards a little later on?
Yeah, there are a lot of important dimensions to a golf course, aren't there, other than just turf quality. And I think we need to focus on that and think about that a little bit more. But so that's why we're going to talk about that and talk to some people from the Environmental Awards. But before I finish on this and we move on again, whilst I was on that little golfing trip, I heard one of the best greenkeeping statements I've heard for a long time.
Oh, go on.
Well, I was chatting to the course manager at the well-conditioned but too tough for us track. And I said to him how great the greens were and how proud they should be of them. And he said, well, they're about an 8, but that's where we want them.
Right.
And I paused and replied, they're quick of an 8 foot, mate. To which he said, no, not stint meter reading, Glenn. An 8 out of 10.
Right.
Huh? I responded. And he's like, well, we don't try and keep them at 10 because it's just too much work. We don't have the labour. We can't push them that hard all the time. So we just aim to keep them at like an 8 out of 10 all the time. And then we find they're always better on the back of it.
Wise words indeed, Glenn. And he's not wrong, is he?
No, he's got it sussed, Henry.
Okay, Glenn, we caught up with Sean last month, didn't we? And he spoke about the new Acelepryn approval, which, of course, is great news for turf managers. But now we've moved on a bit through the season. What's your advice to course managers if they've got problems with chafers?
Okay, so we spend a lot of time talking about leather jackets and Acelepryn timing, but not quite as much time discussing chafer timing.
Yeah.
Deciding when to apply Acelepryn during these summer months for chafers can be a challenge. And a good, strong understanding of your site and your own particular challenges can really help us make those decisions.
Okay, so what do we need to know?
Well, we're looking for peak flight of the target insect, Henry, which isn't as predictable as it is for cranefly.
Right.
The best time to apply is when we know we have that target species just gone peak flight and the insect is in the ground in a juvenile state. And the best way to predict that is watching for that peak flight of the specific insect. Now, chafers are fairly predictable from site to site, but that timing doesn't seem to carry across the country. And when we start looking at the pest tracker data that the industry has kindly reported back, we tend to see chafer hatches reported from late April all the way through to July. Then they slow down a bit in August, and then the hatches start again in September when the moisture returns. Now, my first thought that this was all related to the species, and we get different species timings, but interrogation of that pest tracker data just doesn't support that. We see a wide species hatch at different times in different places. The only consistency is that the hatches seem to slow right down during the droughty periods of the year.
Okay, so no strong pattern identified to say that different species hatch at different times of the year then?
No, which means one of two things. One, we've got it right and there is no strong correlation to the times in the summer when the species hatch.
Okay.
Or two, people reporting into Pest Tracker aren't very good at identifying chafer species.
Yeah.
Both of those options are a possibility. So on our Syngenta Twitter account, we're running some polls at the moment just to help us understand just how good the greenkeeping nation is at identifying adult chafer beetles. So get involved at the normal Syngenta Turf Twitter account. And
I will do.
We'll report that data back next month, Henry, and see how we've got on.
Yes.
But I think that lack of clarity on the data leaves us with some challenges here to time and advise people how to get this application correct.
Yeah, it's nothing's ever straightforward, is it? Okay, so what do we need to know then?
Well, we are aiming for that peak flight period of the target insect. So we really come back to understanding your site, learning the species that you are targeting and being observant.
Okay.
We also have to be very careful about our soil moisture here too, particularly this year where the Acelepryn approval has landed later than maybe we'd have hoped for. So product availability until now has been tricky. So many people will just be starting to gain access to Acelepryn, and this year, the back end of May and June was particularly dry, although as I say that, we are getting quite a lot of rain down here, quite in the south now. So we'll see how this pans out.
Yeah.
But when we apply that Acelepryn, we also need that juvenile target species to be actively feeding near the surface in order to get good levels of control from the application.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a lot of variation going on.
Yeah, there is. Even within the same golf course, we're going to have variables here. Areas that are regularly irrigated, and we've seen a recent hatch will be the perfect place for an Acelepryn application right around now. But unirrigated areas that are dry and droughty we will need to wait until that ground has re-wet, which will allow the insects to be feeding near the surface again where we're applying.
Right, okay. So it is a little bit complicated, isn't it?
It is.
Application timings might actually need to be adjusted depending on those variable hatch patterns that you were just talking about. And there you go, different levels of soil moisture complicating things.
Yeah, so there's no standard piece of advice for this, but there are some good guidelines.
Okay.
Do you still have good soil moisture and have those chafers recently flown or are still flying? Using that advice, you can begin to piece the application puzzle together for your site. For some of you, it'll be a yes. And, you might have had a recent flight and you've got good soil moisture, so you can go. But for others who maybe saw them fly, but it's now very dry, they must hold off and accept that they may have missed this year's application window.
Okay, but what about applying in the autumn then, when our soil's re-wet again?
Well, we have to think carefully. If we had cockchafers hatch in early May, then they've had a while to mature now, so the application will not be applied during its optimum period. But if we saw a late hatch, then maybe that late application is perfect. Now, remember the label states just before or at peak flight for the chafer, so it is important to bear that in mind. But we can, of course, see multiple species hatch at multiple times on the same golf course, so it is tricky.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Okay, so what levels of success might we see from our treatments?
Okay, well, remember that chafers can stay in the soil for a few years. So when you enter into an acelerin program for chafers, you are committing to a program to control these things.
Yeah.
We're confident that we'll reduce populations by 90% of those young chafers, but there could be another 2 years of the more mature ones in that soil.
Yeah, okay. So we've got customers out there that might actually have a mixed population of chafers and leather jackets. Do you have any advice for them? Because we only have one treatment per area per year permitted, don't we?
Well, the key here is to focus on your biggest challenge and optimize things for that one. Now, Anecdotally, I've seen some control on chafers when we apply acelerin later in the year for leather jackets.
Okay.
But I've never seen early summer applications aimed at chafers reduce autumn crane fly because, of course, they're not in the ground. So if you're kind of 50-50 and you're not sure which way to go, I would focus on the back end of the year and target leather jackets because you may get some low levels of control as an added benefit against chafers. You won't get it the other way around. Chafers are an easier species to get because, if they're less mobile in that soil and they continue to feed in the same area. So as long as that soil moisture is there, you will get some level of control.
Okay, Glenn. So lots to think about there, but I think the key points are don't apply acelerin to dry soils or when the grubs won't be feeding, and keep monitoring for chafer flight patterns to understand when the optimal time for treatment is, and that might vary slightly around your site.
That is right. So, Henry, we thought we should mention the development of quite a widespread and troublesome disease that we haven't yet tackled.
Yes.
And one that has been very much on the march already this year.
Yes, it's been on the march on my back lawn at home.
Oh dear.
Which has been full of red thread these last few weeks. But I've also seen it quite widespread around the golf course too.
Yeah, it's one of those diseases we tend to let ride a bit, don't we? But actually it can cause quite a lot of damage.
Yes, and so we thought we'd have a quick run through on it, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so red thread is a common turf disease that occurs throughout the UK and Ireland, and it is a disease that primarily affects fine fescues, perennial ryegrasses and smooth stalk meadowgrass. It is caused by the fungal pathogen Laticeria fusiformis.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Red thread disease is well named, and it gets its name from the red or pink thread-like structures that appear on infected turfgrass blades. It typically starts as small patches of straw-coloured turf which gradually enlarge and coalesce over time. As the disease progresses, the turf may become completely discoloured, and thin and weak.
Yeah, it's not just superficial damage, is it?
Certainly isn't. It can be quite serious, can't it? Red thread disease is most prevalent with temperatures that range between 15 and 27 degrees C, but when humidity is high, and also with extended periods of leaf wetness due to rain, dew, or irrigation. It tends to occur more when sort of hot, dry weather is broken by a period of rainfall.
Used to be a challenge for me in tea banks, Henry, particularly where we had overspill of irrigation.
Yeah.
And I didn't particularly want to feed those tea banks because I didn't particularly want to fly mow them. They were pretty rye and smooth stalk dominated, so that all makes sense. What can we do to reduce the risk of attack then?
Well, our integrated strategy would take into account the establishment, firstly, of less susceptible varieties.
Yes, the tolerance of grasses to red thread usually appears in the turfgrass seed booklet, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and it's very helpful with this disease so that we can make informed choices about, grass selection. Because whenever you go to the STRI at Bingley and look at those grass-type plots, you can really see the differences in susceptibility to red thread in particular. And thinking wider about its control, red thread tends to thrive in nitrogen-deficient turf, and so maintaining proper nitrogen levels through the season is essential. However, excessive nitrogen can also increase susceptibility to the disease, and so a balanced nutrition program, always, one that is set at the right level to support the development of healthy turf should be employed.
And what about water?
Well, like most fungal pathogens, red thread thrives in moist conditions, so it's important to avoid excessive watering, like on your tea banks. It's best to irrigate early in the morning to support the turf, but also at the same time reducing the period of leaf wetness.
And other general good cultural management practice?
Well, it's the usual stuff, isn't it, Glenn? Good soil profile management, prevent too much organic matter accumulation. As we were talking earlier, mitigate the balance of the different stresses. And so maybe ease back on mowing pressure if the wider environmental stresses are building. Maybe think about using Primo Max with its stress mitigation properties helping you out.
And of course, overseed with the best grass varieties you can.
Yeah, red thread is certainly an agronomic indicator, and so it could indicate that you might be able to up your game in certain areas.
Okay, so I'm not sure a tea bank, certainly at venues I managed, they wouldn't have justified a full integrated programme for red thread because... it really didn't detract from the quality of golf course. I doubt a member ever noticed it.
Yes.
But if that had been in a similar sward around a green was really in play,
yes,
it sounds to me like I would probably be reaching for some nutrition coupled with some primo to support the weaker turf whilst not creating excessive growth for me.
Yeah, fair enough, isn't it? But you need to be in front of the game, don't you? Especially if drought stress is building or there's a danger of it being broken by sort of wet weather. But as always, if conditions conspire against you, then you might encounter problems anyway. What we're trying to do really is just reduce the risk of attack. So with that in mind, or in situations where the disease is recurrent every year, targeted fungicide applications might, in very extreme conditions, needs to be considered. What do you think, Glenn?
Well, you would only embark on a preventative fungicide strategy on red thread if you experience severe damage to important areas year on year. Reactive applications after the attack will generally be less effective. But if I were to need a fungicide application to prevent or control red thread, then I think I would go with Instrata Elite, which has red thread on the label. But I think I'd probably have had to exhaust avenues of using Primo and nutrition before I got into a fungicide program for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the event of damage, the restoration of affected areas should involve, obviously, the application of appropriate fertilizer, maybe containing iron sulfate too, and also involve things like overseeding with less susceptible varieties, which might be helpful for the future. But as always, prevention is better than cure.
Always is, Henry. So let's try to create a robust foundation, maintain plant health, and mitigate stress with some good nutrition, irrigation, and employ sensitive management by being aware of any of those building stresses.
Yes, and hopefully we won't be needing to reach for the fungicide or deal with the consequences of a serious outbreak.
Sounds good to me, Henry. Well, Henry, this is a cracker.
Oh, go on.
Well, with the deadline for the Gulf Environmental Awards coming up,
Yeah.
I thought we should take some time to have a chat with a few of the people involved.
Yeah, very good, Glenn. And as we discussed at tea break, the golfing environment is really important.
Yes, it's a great award as well and very close to my heart. And Syngenta sponsored the Operation Pollinator Award, which is part of it too. So this afternoon we have an interview with Meg from the STRI, who coordinates the awards. And now we're going to start with that one. And then I recorded a recent presentation that Iestyn Carpenter did at a local bigger event. Iestyn is the course manager at Carpenter Golf Club, and they won Operation Pollinator Award last year.
Oh.
And then I caught up with Clive Wood, who's a fascinating guy and an ecologist and a golfer, and he's been supporting Carpenter. And I really want to make some more time for this gent because he was brilliant.
Well, that sounds great, Glenn.
So let's first hear what Meg from the STRI has to say. Hi Meg, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. For those of you out there who haven't met Meg, she is the graduate ecological and environmental consultant at the STRI, and she has the honour of managing the Gulf Environmental Awards. It's an award that has been in place since 1995 to recognise, reward and promote individuals and golf courses for their effort in protecting and preserving their unique surroundings. Meg, it is amazing to have you here.
Thank you.
Look, can you tell us a bit about the Environmental Awards, the Gulf Environmental Awards, and what are they all about?
The Golf Environment Awards are an international initiative to encourage golf courses to be more environmentally friendly and sustainable. And the awards promote those that are already doing really good stuff on the golf course to preserve ecology and the environment. And it's just an amazing thing for any golf club to be involved in.
Yeah, and this is so important, isn't it? Because most golf course managers I know have a real focus on this. But, if we move outside of the golf course and the golfers and we think about the public, you're out there, you're talking environmental stuff, you're talking about ecology. How do you think that golf is perceived in the public eye outside of the golf industry?
Yeah, it's perceived quite negatively. That's how I perceived it before I started working in this industry. So I'm just assuming that the rest of the public perceive it like that unless they're involved in golf. Due to probably misconceptions that they all use vast amounts of chemicals and are just depleting natural resources like water and taking up a lot of space that maybe other nature reserves could be on. But I think there are so many golf courses that I've discovered that are basically a nature reserve that you play golf on. And that is what I'm trying to encourage more golf courses to be like.
So you're kind of, it's interesting that you say even when you stepped into this, you had a fairly negative perception of golf. And your perception has changed significantly now you're involved in it.
Yeah, just the amount of passionate greenkeepers and course managers that I've met that are so interested in ecology really surprised me, and I just think it's such a positive feeling to know that so many people that are managing these massive areas of land are not just doing it for golf but also to attract wildlife and help the environment in whatever way they can.
It's so important that we communicate this with the wider world. How can the Environmental Awards help us doing that?
Well, it's not only showcasing the ones that we've won, it's also encouraging others to enter. So we always write a bit of a case study on each of the finalists, and that goes on our website. So it's promoting what they've done, and then it's also inspiring those that maybe didn't think they were doing enough already to enter, or those that aren't yet doing enough to do more, and hopefully they'll enter next time and feel that they're worthy of an award.
So it's just continuing to drive and engage people internally. And I think we could do more about, promoting. I know, of course, I'm going to visit tomorrow, Carpenter Golf Club. I know they won an award this year and a couple of years back. And Iestyn's done a great job of getting some stuff into some local press. And I think he might have even done a radio interview with someone. But there's some real opportunities there to kind of showcase what we're doing, isn't there?
Yeah, I know of a few finalists and winners that have been in the local and more regional newspapers as well. So we as STRI will promote and support the clubs in getting into all the different media channels that we can do, sharing everything about what they do on social media, and yeah, just getting the word out there that golf courses are doing amazing things, and hopefully getting it to an audience that isn't interested in golf as well. So I think it's quite hard to do that sometimes, but yeah, if it can get to all the, you know, eco warriors that might be against golf and see them as a bad thing, or just general members of the public, I think we just try and get the information out there that all these golf courses are doing the right thing.
And a lot of what we've just spoken about there is kind of post-award winning. But there's a lot of community engagement that goes on in golf courses, isn't there?
Yeah.
Pre-award, even for people that aren't entering these awards. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen there? And is there any of the awards that take that into account?
Yeah, that is something that we really value, actually, when we are judging the applicants. So I've had golf courses that have had Girl Guide groups come and do backwalks on them. So that was at Clitheroe Golf Club. I've had Hever Castle Golf Club. They've done really good stuff involving junior golf, and they have a whole area that's like bug hotels that the children have helped to build, but also they come and do like a bit of outdoor learning in that space. There's other clubs that have had local community groups come and do tree planting. St Andrews Golf Links have done a lot of like burying of the Christmas trees. So they collected all them from the community, and that's helped build up the sand dune system. So yeah, all sorts going on.
Yeah, they sounds like some great kind of success stories of engaging with local community, which is a key part of communicating what we do, because that message then emanates out from those people further on.
Yeah.
Kind of closer to the ground and on the golf courses, what success stories have you seen there? What kind of things are you seeing as you walk these golf courses, kind of looking around?
All sorts, really. Again, so I'm going to mention them again, but Hever Castle have reinstated a sewage treatment system that comes from Hever Castle and from the golf club. So they now use all the sewage, treat it through a system of lagoons, and use all that water to irrigate the golf course, which in a time where we're having more and more droughts and water security is such an issue, I think that's amazing. And Al Mouj Golf Club in Oman, who were our International Environmental Golf Course of the Year winner in the GEAs 2023, they have done a similar thing there, that 100% of their golf course is irrigated using treated sewage, which is amazing. And then on a bit of a smaller scale, but also really highly recognised by us, there's projects that are kind of focusing on a bit more species specific. So we've got Cirencester Golf Club that have had a project working with the Duke of Burgundy butterfly. So they've involved a local agricultural college who have done trials on the different sward length of cowslips to see which ones the Duke of Burgundy butterfly prefer. And I think like the fact that that's happening on a golf course is just incredible. And then, yeah, Corhampton developing their chalk scrapes on their chalk downland course have attracted a small blue butterfly, which is one of the reasons why they were the winner of the Operation Pollinator Award in GEAs 2023. And then we've got things like Afriyie Golf Academy in Uganda, who entered last year for the first time. And they got a special recognition because of the different fights that they have in the country, the different challenges that they have, and how they are facing them. So they've also involved the community and local schools, and they get a lot of litter on the course. It's open to the public, and they are finding a lot of plastic bottles. So they've collected them and made them into bins, which is just like a really inventive idea. And yeah, they do a lot of litter picks as well. So yeah, they're doing everything they can at their course as well to protect the environment. That is something that is quite hard for us to compare the golf courses in different countries that obviously have different budgets and different challenges, but that's why we thought it was really worth giving them a special recognition at this year's awards.
Amazing. Now, if I have a look at the categories that are all on the website, by the way, which is golfenvironmentalawards.com, there are 6 categories in there, and there are 5 of them that make absolute sense, but there's one of them that I want to question you a little bit.
Okay.
We've got International Environmental Golf Club of the Year, amazing award. UK Environmental Golf Club of the Year, amazing. Ecological Project of the Year, which incidentally is the one I won back in about 1996, not showing off anybody.
Brilliant.
Conservation Champion, which is excellent. That's an individual that's really focused on things. And then Operation Pollinator, where we're going to talk to Iestyn, which is going to come up in this podcast as well. But the one that's drawing my attention is Sustainable Project of the Year. Now, sustainable is such a large word that covers so many things, but such a unique opportunity in there, I think, to talk about something outside of the norm.
Yeah.
Talk me through some of the things you've seen, what you're looking for, what you're hoping for, what your dream applicant looks like, because I think this is such an important one for all of us to really be driving on.
It really is. So this is not to do specifically with wildlife, with creatures. It's more to do with, water security or cutting down on electric, anything that's not to do with living organisms, really.
Right.
So that's why Hever Castle won this year, because they were the ones that reinstated the Victorian pump system and irrigate the whole golf course with treated sewage water, because a lot of golf courses still use drinking water to irrigate, which is obviously not good. So I am looking for something that is future proof, just an inventive idea that doesn't have to have loads of money put into it. It's just something that saves a resource, a natural resource, and harbours it for the future.
Yeah, no, it's one I'm excited about, because I think if we think about, we walk down the line over the next decade, we're going to see diesel reduction, quantity, CO2 reduction. We're going to see more electric car points installed in car parks, more water harvesting. There are so many areas of sustainability that I think as the golf course industry, we can really move forward on. I think a lot of people are thinking about it. Some of it needs some real heavy investment in infrastructure to make work from the golf club. And that's a really nice thing to see, I guess, that the golf club has really got behind it as well as the golf course manager. But I think there's also things that golf course managers can do without an awful lot of budget investment. So, I'm really excited to see how that one goes. Look, is this just for the exceptionally good, or should everyone be getting involved? Because everyone's doing something.
Exactly. Everyone is doing something. Everyone should get involved. We aren't looking for the clubs that have the most amount of land and money and doing absolutely excelling in every way possible. I mean, obviously they would count, but we definitely value the clubs that are doing small scale projects. It depends on your own resources as to what you can do. So it would be completely unfair to just rule out the clubs that have lower budgets or less greenkeeping staff. So every project is valid.
Well, I think sometimes the smaller budget courses and the courses with less staff have to think around problems a lot more. So probably doing a lot more than they realise compared to the larger budget places.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Look, I love the award. I love the dinner. I love it all. Even going back to when Bob was involved, it's a great experience. How do people go about entering, and what is involved in that entering process?
It's really easy to enter. It's just an online form at www.golfenvironmentawards.com. There's the 6 different categories, and the deadline is the Friday, the 25th of August. So there's still plenty of time to get your entries in. We really want as much detail as possible, so I don't want it to be a rushed thing with just a couple of sentences for each question. The questions are all tailored to each award category as well, so it should help you. And we also want as many good quality pictures as you can send us, for not just for us to see and judge and get an idea of what the course looks like and the scale of the ecological rough or whatever. It's also so we can use them, if you are a finalist, we can use them in the presentation that we have in January on the Wednesday of BTME.
Amazing. Okay. And so probably not the most positive statement, but talk me through some of the mistakes you see on applications. Where do people get it wrong? Because, you know, when that application comes in, that is your first chance to see them, isn't it? You don't know the golf course. That's the only experience you've got of that site.
Yeah, so yeah, you do want to make a good impression. I'd say the main thing that I see is people rushing their applications and not putting enough information in. And like you say, some of them I will have been to, but I mean, I'm judging them all blind, and I also anonymise them all for the judging panel. So, as much detail as possible is critical. Unfortunately, we don't get to visit all the finalists anymore because it's too much cost and not environmentally friendly to be driving all around the UK. As much detail as possible. I think that is where people fall down, is just rushing it and thinking just because they're a well-known golf course that the judges will know exactly what they're talking about, what they're referring to, and exactly what the course looks like.
Okay, so once we've submitted our application form with lots of details, some really nice photos, and explained nicely what we're doing, how does the award continue from that point? How is it assessed from that point on?
It's normally a couple of us that will narrow it down to the finalists. We normally have about 4 finalists in each category, and then they will be taken and summarised with their pictures into a presentation for a panel of judges, which is made up of a representative of each of our sponsors, which Syngenta are obviously one of them. And we will then choose the winners, which is normally done in about October time, but everyone else has to wait till the awards ceremony to find out. So then we have a nice dinner and music and a nice award ceremony, and we do a presentation on each of the finalists, not just the winners. And yeah, it's just a really nice opportunity to learn what other people are doing, get some inspiration and ideas for what you could do on your course, and just network really. I think it's definitely one of my favourite events of the year.
Yeah, and as a sponsor, I've been fortunate enough to sit there a few times, and it is great to sit around a table. And it's one that the golf clubs take really seriously. When a golf club gets nominated, it's great to see chairmans of greens and club secretaries and general managers there as well. So it's a really, like you say, a great opportunity to network with a wide range of people who are all like-minded and taking this seriously. So brilliant. But I guess for me, the take-home message there is this: in order to do well in this event, you need to be proud of what you're doing and you need to sell yourself.
Yes.
Because there's less and less time spent on the ground looking at what's going on, and more listening to golf course managers or representatives from the golf club really selling what they're doing. So don't be shy, people. Tell us what you're up to. Meg really, really wants to know what's going on your golf course. Okay. I think that is amazing. I think we've covered a lot of stuff there for some amazing awards. I just want to say thank you for coming along and talking to me. It's such an exciting time in the industry. There's loads of changes going on, and it's great that you've committed so much time and energy to this. So on behalf of the industry, thank you for committing as much time as you have to moving this awards forward, because it is a great event.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So just to remind you all, if you wish to enter, go over to the golfenvironmentalawards.com. You'll find all the award categories on there. There's an online form to fill out. Get involved. It is such a brilliant and worthwhile piece of recognition. And, I would be amazed if every golf club listening to this podcast hasn't got some kind of project that fits into one of those categories. Hopefully we can drive some more engagement, pull in some more recognition, get some more entries, and, take your time to sell yourself, because you're all doing amazing stuff. Meg, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed that. And I think the message there is to make sure you enter and actually sell yourself. A lot of people are doing a lot of good work, but they don't do a great job of selling themselves and what they're doing.
Yeah, good advice.
Okay, now let's have a little listen to Iestyn, who I recorded at a recent local bigger course walk. And let's have a listen to what he's got to say.
The golf club was founded in 1891. It's in South Downs National Park. an area of outstanding beauty. Pure chalk soils here. You 4 inches to 12 inches across the estate, you're straight into the white gold, as I would call it. The course was originally a 9-hole golf course. Then in the 70s, it expanded to an 18 holes, but double tees to 9 greens. Then in the 90s, it went to a full 18-hole golf course. Basically, for people that don't know Corhampton, in some areas of the estate are quite tight. Some holes run quite parallel to each other. So there's a lot of trees here for a downland golf course. But the reason why we've got that is because we've got to define each hole. And it's quite difficult to encourage like a downland feel. So we're trying to find the concept of balancing the two together. But we've managed to introduce lots of like chalk downland habitats within the estate and working it in the mindset of it being a golf course and defining each hole. So our goals. To produce thin long roughs to encourage rare native wildflowers. So 13 years ago, there wasn't many ecology roughs here. It was all mainly cut as it would normally for general rough. So when I got here, I was like, right, we need long rough in specific areas. You can imagine that doesn't really go down too well with some golfers. So the reality of that is, especially where they haven't been managed as ecology roughs. And the facts are that the rough at first was very thick and coarse of all the wrong grasses. So, but over a period of time, with a cut and collection point, where we would cut and collect in the autumn, and also troublesome areas we do in the spring, the areas started to thin out over a very long period, 4 to 5 years. Replanting trees on the estate to deal with ash dieback. I don't know what it's like for everybody else who works on golf courses, but ash dieback here we've got hit really hard. That's okay. It's been, yeah, I think the hot summers haven't helped, but we've lost big clusters of ash trees. So we got a tree planting nursery at the moment that we set up, and the ecology group helped with planting 500 saplings that we could use to spread those saplings out at a specific point when they get a bit more mature to work that out. And then also, the one thing I would like to say about the bottom one is thin out sward to promote the right habitat with the existing seabed. What has completely blown my mind here with doing this is when we started the cut and collection over like 13 years ago, what I did begin to see was, over a period of time, variety of colour coming into the long roughs. And that is from an existing seedbed that's already there, and we've produced the right habitat for those seeds to germinate and take. That was free. I'm not going to lie, wildflower seed is very expensive. Okay, so to get something like that from just doing a general operation was, well, it's something I learned every day is a learning day, but that was a real opportunity to learn and take forward. So grants. Keith, who's part of the ecology group, he's not here today, but he came up with an idea of the Beelines Trust with the South Downs National Park. Basically, this is an opportunity to gain grants for wildflower seed, but you've got to obviously prove the reasons why you want it. So when I talked about the golf course going and being extended in the 90s with the 12th to 15th holes, that is old farmland. And that area reacts differently to the older part of the golf course, which is 130 years old, let's say. We've done the cut and collection there, but the reality of it is the grasses are still really thick and coarse, and I've always wanted to get a bit of yellow rattle in there to thin out the sward, but it's very expensive. So we had a meeting with the South Downs National Park and Beelines Trust, and we had a grant approved for £4,000 to invest into wildflower seed in specific areas. We have had a take this year, which is great. I wish it was a little bit more, but this is standard with wildflower. It just doesn't happen overnight. It can take a long period of time. But what the future will be, hopefully, is the yellow rattle will take year by year, and then maybe we'll be able to harvest that seed, relocate it across other troublesome areas across the estate, or even possibly sell it on to put it back into the ecology pot in the club. Okay, so everything is about, for me, is about being self-funding and sustainable as much as we possibly can. Okay, so the scrapes. I'm not going to go into graphic detail about this because we're going to go and see them, but I'm going to tell you how it happened. I don't know if depths of winter, and we cleared all this area out, and the original plan was to have all these trees spaced out, maybe plant some extra trees in, oversow with a grass seed mix, and then have a little bit of an ecology bit in the middle. Then a friend of mine, talking turf, we walked past it and he went, "Wow, you're doing a chalk scrape." And I'm like, "What's a chalk scrape?" Really don't know what chalk scrape is. And that's how it started. And that individual pointed me in the direction of a chap called Clive Wood. So Clive basically kindly came in and he gave his input and wrote a report on where we could enhance this scrape, but we also looked at other areas where we could put scrapes onto the estate. And the reality of it is, over a period of time, it's really taken off. And the whole purpose of it is to produce a rare habitat to encourage rare pollinators. Okay, we got Wayfarer's Walk that goes across the state. It's a famous walk around the South Downs. We use this opportunity to do the corridors and the bug homes in these areas. Now, we've got signage everywhere across the estate for the membership, but I also want it to go out to the general public. I am so bored of golf being the bad guy, okay? It's mind-numbingly boring, and I think this is, everybody, if you can, should take this opportunity. If you're doing ecology, get it out there. Like, golf is not the bad person here. Like, everybody's here today and you're here for a reason. You know, you're here because you want to possibly take it back to your business and you want to promote it. Right, so the ecology group. 2020, through COVID, we all can remember it, the first lockdown. We managed to do so much more ecology with that period before the world returned to semi-normal in May. The one thing I realised was halfway through that May period, I kind of sat back and thought, do you know what? We've achieved so much in a short space of time and I really want to push this on. But we're a team of 5 here, and I know for a fact, obviously, without the golf course, we haven't got the ecology part of it. And I was beginning to think out the box, and my thought process was, I'm going to ask help off the membership. That is going to be my goal here. So we put an email out to the membership, and we had an ecology walk, and Clive Wood kindly joined us, and we did a full walk. And at the end of it, everybody was like, "Iestyn, what do you want? What would you like?" I went, "I'd like to start an ecology committee." And everybody didn't like the word committee. So I was like, "A group?" And they were like, "Yes, we'll go with a group." Okay. "So what would you like to do within this group?" I was like, "Well, I need somebody to build bird boxes and bat boxes." Someone was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." "I need somebody to communications, newsletter." Jill kindly did that. And it just built from there. And you had like Keith was there going, "I'll look at grants and I'll look at sorting the signage out." I think the point I want to try and get at here is that my knowledge of ecology is, I'm learning every day. I don't know a huge amount. I'll be honest about that. But surrounding yourself with the right people, with the right attitude, can actually get you a long way. And you can learn from each other. And I think the key part is about the data collection and seeing what difference we are actually making. Thank you very much.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And I was particularly impressed with how he managed to pull in extra resources and expertise in from the outside world and the golfing members. So,
Yes.
Iestyn referred to Clive at that event and in that talk, and Clive was kind enough to give me some time afterwards. So here's an interview. Sat down with Clive in his kitchen, nonetheless.
Very good.
Well, after a fantastic visit to Corhampton and some really interesting conversations with Iestyn, I thought it would be great to see if we could catch up with Clive Wood, the recent ex-chair of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight branch of the Butterfly Conservation and current member of the Conservation Subcommittee, who is also a very keen golfer who has been supporting Iestyn down at Corhampton. Now, Clive, thank you. We've had some problems today. I think this is the third attempt to get this going.
I think it is, Glenn.
Thank you very much for letting me come along, sit in your kitchen and talk to you about this. Clive, could you talk us through what work Iestyn's been doing at Corhampton and how you've supported that and how you think that has benefited the local environment?
Thanks, Glenn. It's great to have a chat with you. Iestyn's been doing lots of things well before I got involved. Things like cut and collect on the grass to help wildflowers get rooted and prosper. Nice hedgerow management, lots of owl and bat boxes. Making sure some areas are only lightly managed, no chemicals, occasional cutting. And also simple things like just leaving dead wood, all being a neat pile. But it's amazing to think that a big pile of dead wood in this country can support up to 5,000 different species. Now, these might be unglamorous species like funguses and lichens and rusts, but also an astonishing 750 species of beetles can live happily on old, dead and decaying wood. And those beetles are food for something or someone. So he's done lots of good things, but in April 2018, he asked me to take a look at some work he'd done that resulted in a chalk scrape, and he wanted to know what he could do to improve the course of butterflies. Well, Iestyn was great because actually, I said he might think it was a chalk scrape, but it wasn't big enough, it wasn't shallow enough, it was too flat, it was shaded by trees, and Iestyn, in good heart, improved that scrape.
So just going back to a chalk scrape, for those that don't really understand what a chalk scrape is, can you talk us through what Corhampton is with its underlying soil and how chalk scrapes really work for them?
Corhampton is based on Droxford Common, which is a large piece of chalk. So you don't have to go down very far and you're into pure white chalk. And chalk scrapes are simply what they say on the tin, that all the fertile topsoil has been removed to expose the bare chalk. And you create these scrapes. You don't want them too small, you don't want them too large, but something like, I think in terms of the size of a tennis court, about 250 square metres. And that's an ideal size for a chalk scrape. And why they're so good is that they're an instant hit of diversity. If you put it on amongst a load of grassland, then you've immediately got diversity, because on the chalk scrape, either natural or seeded, will become wildflowers. The grasses can't get a grip. There's not enough fertility. But what Iestyn has done is sow those scrapes with native plants like bird's foot trefoil, scabiouses, different types, knapweeds, kidney vetch, thyme, marjoram, and they now look an absolute fantastic picture. But not just for humans, they're fantastic for all sorts of bugs, bees, butterflies, moths, beetles. They're used by a whole range of different species. And what Iestyn did was to take my advice on what he'd done on the chin and improve that scrape, but also, bless him, he agreed to create 3 more chalk scrapes amidst some quite tall grassland to really add a huge boost of diversity onto Corhampton Golf Club.
Yeah, and they look an absolute picture now in the summer with all those, everything in there and all that diversity. And they are so different from all the surrounding grassland. But I remember looking at them probably 2018, maybe 2019, when they were in their really early phases, and they were quite a barren, white landscape. What sort of feedback was there from golfers? What is your take on it as a golfer, and what kind of communication opportunities are there to discuss that with membership in order to help them understand where that project is going?
Well, the communications were essential. You really had to tell the members what you were doing and why. It'd always be the case that some people would be unhappy with this bare white, chalk amidst a sea of tall grasses. But in reality, within a year, the yellow plants, particularly the trefoils and the kidney vetches, had got a grip and established, were already in flower. The knapweeds took a bit longer, and now you've got a huge flush of purple and blues and the scabiouses and the yellows so they are now an absolute picture. But that was started within a relatively short space of time. Personally, if my golf ball went in a scrape, I'd be delighted because I'd find it so much easier than in the tall grassland that surrounds these scrapes. It's not essential that everybody has to think these are the best things they've ever seen, they're fantastic. What's more important is that members understand why they're there and understand the contribution they're making to meet some of the challenges to help Corhampton make a difference for all the challenges that nature faces, particularly in southeast England.
Yeah, and Corhampton isn't the biggest golf course in the world either, but he's found plenty of opportunities and places tucked away in corners and in the right areas to make these things work, where they don't get in the way of golf at all and they add to the environment. And I think that's one of the reasons he was so heavily recognised in the environmental awards. Now, from a maintenance point of view, what do these things involve? I guess it's quite important to balance the size of what you take on alongside the maintenance, because if that's not happening, they can start to go downhill fairly quickly.
Yeah, you've created an environment where things like brambles and dock and other species would say, oh, that looks good, there's no grasses there, I'd like some of that, please. You don't want to make them too big. Let's say half the size of a football pitch. It would be far too big to maintain. But in a tennis court size scrape would take about 2 people 1 hour a year to manage. 1 hour a year to manage, that's all. And all they're doing is removing the thatch of last year's growth. It's not gardening, but what you're trying to do is to remove the old growth so that the new plants, so you want to do this in March or April, the new plants can grow low and strong, not tall and leggy. Because tall and leggy shades out and cools down the chalk. And the great thing about chalk scrape is that it's warmer than the surrounding habitat. It warms up more quickly, it retains its heat. And that's attractive for lots of wildflowers and lots of bees, bugs, butterflies, and nesting sort of bees as well. So dead easy to make and dead easy to maintain. The only thing I would say is that occasionally, if there's any spot treatment needed, sort of Roundup or whatever, clearly that's got to be done by someone with the necessary tickets, and that's got to be a member of the ground staff. But really, these should be maintained by volunteers, not by the ground crew.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point, because Iestyn has done a great job of leaning on his environmental group within the club, and he's also managed to kind of gain your support as a local expert. Have you got any suggestions or ideas about how people can go out and find that expertise and that support in their local communities?
It's a difficult one. I really think in this day and age, a lot of voluntary organisations really struggle to get people to sort of not just be members, but actually to help out. And that's true whether you're a gardening club or a plant club, whatever. Nonetheless, there are people like me around. In this country, there are lots of charities devoted to amphibians, bats, birds, RSPB branches, etc. And what I would say is for any golf course is to reach out, perhaps invite these organisations to give a talk, perhaps in return for a small donation, or invite them onto the course to do surveys, because these courses are typically private land, and the local branch RSPB may be really keen to do a survey, or somebody can put up a owl detector, a bat detector, and will welcome the opportunity. Not everybody will, but there'll be some people who would want to know what was on this golf course because they've never been before. And it's a fantastic opportunity to sort of reach out, but also ask your members. Your members will be members of other groups. So do they have any particularly strong links or know people who'd be willing to give a talk, do a survey, do a guided walk around an area? And but it's not easy, but there are opportunities. But whatever Iestyn's achieved, he didn't achieve it in 1 or 2 years. He's been at this for many, many years. I've been working with him for the last 5. So it does take time, but keep at it, and people will want to help.
I think we've got to be better at throwing our doors open. We are private land in general, but we do some amazing work in these golf clubs. And I think people want to come around and look at it, and it's only by creating those networks and discussing what we do and opening our doors that we can begin to reach those people that can support and offer advice. It may not be the first door you knock on, but that door may open another door, and behind that third door may be where the support lies. Now, you're both a golfer and an ecologist, and so you've got a fairly unique viewpoint on this. We've spoken quite a lot about Iestyn and Corhampton Golf Club, which is a really nice piece of downland land. Many of the other people listening to this will be on clay or links land or maybe some kind of mountainous regions in some of the Welsh golf courses. What can the wider golf community do to support more pollinating insects, more of those kind of foundations, and do to kind of help us communicate with the wider industry what we're doing?
I think I'd be astonished if there is not a golf course land without an opportunity to do what the principles of what Corhampton has done. It's not about being on chalk per se, but it's about creating richness and diversity and looking for opportunities and engaging. So if you're on a heavy clay soil course, then chalk down and chalk scrapes won't be an option for you. But creating water features and attracting a huge diversity of insects, bug life, dragonflies, etc. to ponds would make a huge difference. If you've got lots of woodland, punching holes in it to get light in would also make a big difference, and doing work around the edges so you don't have abrupt grassland and tall trees. You have a gradient. So wherever you're looking, there will be opportunities. Trees fall down everywhere, whether it's on clay ground or chalky ground or high ground or low ground. Don't clear the wood away. Pile it up neatly, huge great stacks, the bigger the better, and you'll be providing that habitat for those 750 species of beetles that I talked about earlier. So every course will have opportunities, every course will have challenges, but look around, and where you see lots and lots of the same sort of habitat, that's where you want to think about, how can I make that different? Can I make the grasses taller and shorter? Can I create some bare ground? Can I make, whatever the challenges are, have a think about that.
So really look to try and create as many different habitats as we can within the area that we've got. Now, one of the things we were talking about off mic was kind of the amount of land that golf uses across the country, and we kind of reached a figure from the various bits we knew of kind of roughly 2%. But we also discussed what a unique opportunity golf has then to connect different landscapes across the country. Do you mind sharing your thoughts on that?
It's a really good point, Glenn. Golf courses, yeah, I've seen the same figure, about 2%. To put that in some sort of context, the area of England devoted or designated as triple SIs, sites of special scientific interest, they're only 8%. So golf course is about a quarter of all the land that includes large parts of the New Forest, triple SI. So intrinsically, there's a huge opportunity to add to that area of rich land. If you fly over any golf course, often you will see, particularly in southern England, you'll see a golf course surrounded by lots of arable fields, grazing farmland, or urban development, villages, etc. Nothing wrong with that at all. The problem is that the nice bits of nature are often scattered around. It might be a national nature reserve here, it might be a nice bit of common downland over there. And where golf courses are making a difference is both providing breeding opportunities for species on the site, foraging opportunities for species on the site and moving through the site, but also helping to join up different sites by, if you provide some diversity, you're helping species, not just butterflies, could be birds as well, whatever, mammals. You're making it easier for them to move through and within a landscape, to forage and to seek shelter and to find mates and to breed, and therefore to become more resilient. Because you're providing a pipeline, a conduit, a stepping stone, whatever analogy you want to use, between different types of habitat. So each golf course can play its part in joining up the dots, and that connectivity is absolutely critical to reversing the decline in nature that we've all seen through the David Attenborough programs, through reports that come out over the year. just going back to butterflies, 50% of all the species of butterfly in this country are at risk of extinction. 50% are at risk of extinction within our lifetimes, and that really should be unacceptable. So we can all play a difference in our gardens, but if we're involved with the golf course, let's just see what we can do to create a bit of diversity, to help nature by providing a bit of, improving the habitat that we can see and pleasure playing through every day.
What a unique opportunity golf has to offer something in there. But Clive, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Complete pleasure, Glenn. Thank you.
Wow, I really enjoyed that, Glenn. They were really good, weren't they? Iestyn is excellent, isn't he? And of course, really, really interesting. And it just shows, doesn't it, how many opportunities there are for course managers to build those really important environmental and ecological foundations across their courses.
Yeah, and Clive was great too, wasn't he? There were some great take-home messages for me. Get members involved. You're there to manage the golf course. Ask them for help to manage the wider environment.
Yes.
Don't overcommit. Make it a manageable amount of work. Throw your doors open to experts and build a network. People want to help, but they might not have time.
Yes.
And make diverse and different habitats. And of course,
yes,
sell what you're doing. Enter the environmental awards. Let's see if we can tell the world what golf is doing for the environment.
Yeah, it's really important. Really, really important. Okay, and Clive was great, wasn't he? We really need to get him back in again. Well, after that, Glenn, we really should take the time to talk about protecting pollinating insects in our application tip of the month.
Okay, to start with, we should understand what the regulatory authorities call a pollinating insect.
Okay.
And a pollinating insect is, of course, a posh name for a butterfly, an insect, or a bee. But there is an even more official name than that, and that is arthropod. Now, arthropods are invertebrate animals that possess an exoskeleton, basically things like spiders, insects, bees, butterflies.
Yes.
And these are at the bottom of the pyramid, that foundation that Clive was talking about. And these things, these pollinating insects, are critical to build that environmental infrastructure.
Yes.
Bird boxes are no use unless the birds living in them have something to feed on. A small blue tit, as an example, will eat over 300 insects a day. So we need those pollinating insect populations not only to pollinate, but also to sustain the next level of animals up the food chain.
Okay, so committing some time and thinking about good stewardship is really important, especially when it comes to pollinators, isn't it?
No, it really is. And we need to take care when applying plant protection products, which have all been assessed by the Chemical Regulatory Department to be safe as long as the measures stated on the label are put in place to eliminate any risk.
Okay, so how do we know what products that we use might need a little bit of extra care?
Okay, so it would be nice if a label had a really consistent, clear labelling on it.
Yeah.
The same on every label where you could find this information, but depending on the age of the label, it can vary a little bit. But it's usually in the restrictions section of the label, which is where you find the information to help you eliminate the risk. That's where that information goes. And it will tell you what measures you need to put in place to avoid any risk.
Right, so have you got any examples?
Yes, I sure do. In Strata Elite and Eternity, which are both fairly modern labels, they both state, for all applications, avoid spraying within 10 metres of unmanaged land, including rough grassland, to reduce effects on non-target insects or other arthropods.
Okay.
And this is to ensure that you are keeping away from wildflowers or areas that bees and insects could be foraging.
Okay.
Now, if we look at Heritage Max, which is an older label, that one states, Avoid spraying within 5 metres of the field boundary to reduce effects on non-target insects or other arthropods.
Okay.
So it's an older label. It seems like it's quite an agricultural statement, but what it's doing is it's saying keep away from wildflowers or areas where bees could be foraging. So what CRD has done here is they've looked at the product, determined there is no hazard when applied properly to the surfaces the product is designed for.
Yes.
It simply wouldn't get a registration if there was a hazard there. And then they've used the legal document, which is the label, to ensure you, the spray operator, put measures in place to ensure that when the label is adhered to, the risk is eliminated.
Okay.
It's your responsibility as an applicator to read to it and stick to it.
Okay, that's very clear. But the wording for acelepryn is slightly different, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Acelepryn is an insecticide, and as you would expect, there is more risk to insects when dealing with an insecticide than there would be with a fungicide.
Okay.
As the desired outcome of that particular product is to reduce target insect populations. Now, again, if there was a direct risk to bees, this wouldn't get registered.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean there shouldn't be some additional stewardship in place to eliminate risk.
Okay.
Now, the acelepryn label states, to protect bees and pollinating insects, do not apply to crop plants when in flower. Do not use where bees are actively foraging. Do not apply when flowering weeds are present.
Okay.
And this is all really workable advice. Basically, avoid areas that have flowering plants, flower beds around the clubhouse. Avoid the midday sun in areas that bees could be foraging in. And avoid applying to areas where we have flowering weeds.
Yeah, I mean, that does seem very doable, doesn't it? But it also shows just how important it is to read and understand that label.
It is so important, and it all comes back to the same practices, Henry. You know, stick to good integrated strategies to help reduce how much we need to use these products.
Yeah.
When we do apply them, do it in a safe manner. Read the label. Keep that spray pressure low to avoid drift. You know, keep it 2 to 3 bar.
Yeah.
Target the most important areas, not the luxury areas, and understand the impact.
Yeah, very good, Glenn, and really straightforward. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
So, Glenn, we come to the end of another episode. And so, would you please like to summarise for us the poetic flavour of this episode?
It would be my pleasure, Henry. In August, summer's warmth is at its peak, with long nights and hot days every day of the week. Prepare for humidity and all it may bring, for August is when we see a leaf wetness upswing. Butterflies and bees will dance in that breeze, flitting from flower to flower with ease. Though days grow shorter, the sun still shines on golfers enjoying the course's designs. The season is closing, agronomic autumn approaches, microdochium weather arriving in small doses. Members' discussions on greens renovations. They must learn it's to build our healthy foundations.
So it's just me and you now, Glenn. I'll see you next month.
No, Henry. There's a whole host of agronomic poets still hanging on.
Oh.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Adam.
Hi, Gordon.
It's time to go now. Night-night.
Nighty-night.